understand about Hindus and need to understand about Hinduism is quite obvious in this country. I chaired for about 10 years the Oberoi Foundation for Religious Studies. And the purpose was to talk about Indic religions, Hinduism. And I was absolutely, totally surprised, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised, that one of the programs that we undertook was to train teachers, to bring them in different parts of the country, teaching middle class and the high school students, and then telling them about Hinduism and about Hindus. And the total kind of lack of understanding about Hinduism in this country was quite obvious. And now that I chair my own temple board and also Hindu University of America board, and I find that all around the country, we still have people not simply ignorant about Hindus and ignorant about Hinduism, but there is a pretty distorted view at that time about both Hindus and Hinduism. So I think I would probably like to say a few words about Hinduism. And then I would say that at the present time, how is it, why is it that people don't have understanding, and we need to talk about enhancing that understanding and building upon that in this country. And I think a couple words about Hinduism, because Sattology and what you have done, I deeply appreciate that, Satsangiji, because at the present time, people don't understand that Hinduism is the oldest living religion. We call it Sanatan Dharma. It's eternal. It is a natural religion. And the reason is that understanding of it with the philosophies, with practices, and universally they are accessible. One can understand it through sincere study, through experience, through reason. And at the present time, all over the world today, Hindu diaspora is there and having an impact upon many countries, not simply the United States today that we want to have understanding, but in many countries around the world. And one thing that Satsangiji, you have been talking about, in order to have the Sat, truth be told, then Hinduism is the one that did not use that as a slogan when it said, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina, or when it said, Vasudev Kutumbakam, that the entire human race is one family, the universe is a family. When it said that no one is superior, no one is inferior, all are brothers and sisters forward to prosperity. And I won't read the Sanskrit verses, but as you know, when we say, oh, Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina and all that, we say, may all beings be happy, may all beings be healthy, may all beings experience prosperity, may none in the world suffer. And then we also say all the time, and that again is a reality and it's not a slogan, we say Ekam Sat, and again I won't read it, but truth is one, and the wise call it by many names. The reality is that today in this country, Hinduism came, and people don't probably remember, but many, many years ago, and you know the names, and Henry David Thoreau, you know the name Ralph Waldo Emerson, and both of them, when they talked about Hinduism, Thoreau said, whenever I have read any part of the Vedas, I have felt that some unearthly, unknown light illuminated me. I won't read all that he said, but I would say to the readers of the scriptures, if they wish for a good book, read the Bhagavad Gita. It deserves to be read with reverence even by Yankees. And Emerson when he talked about Hindus and Hinduism, he said, in the great books of India, an empire spoke to us, nothing small or unworthy, but large, serene, consistent, the voice of an old intelligence, which in another age and climate had pondered and thus disposed of the question that exercises us. And Hindus are the ones who practice Hinduism. Hindus are the ones who reflect Hinduism in their lives. And when we say that we need to see that in this country Hindus and Hinduism is understood better, then I think we need to also ask, what is the reason that it's not understood? It's not understood, we know that. But the reason at the present time is that when Hinduism began in this country, and you can go back to Swami Vivekananda, and after that, so many gurus came, and it was seen as a religion that had simply an impact upon yoga, meditation, Ayurveda, and they are not unimportant, they are very important. But at the same time, they simply thought about Hinduism as an exotic religion, as something that's very wonderful in terms of its own aspects of meditation and all that. But its impact upon society, what it can do, what its values are, how those values can be expressed, that at the present time has been lacking. In my own university, when I was the vice provost, vice chancellor, and I had all these Hinduism and other religions taught in my own university. And I would talk with people who are teaching there and asking them how much even students want to learn or know that, and how much the community knows. And always the answer was they know very little about it. And so I think the need today, in order for them to understand, is immense. And now I can say a couple words what it can do. Why do we want to understand it in this society at this time? And the point that I want to make is that today in this society, we have a dysfunctional Washington. We have a country that's totally divided, a country where people cannot even tolerate each other. And when we talk about toleration, Hinduism and Hindus have thought, and Hindus have practiced it, and Hindus have said it to all, that we don't simply tolerate. Toleration is the one that you use when you think that the other person is inferior to you and you tolerate him. We say it's not toleration, it is acceptance. It is not simply even acceptance, it is more than that, it is celebration of differences. We as Hindus are the ones who believe in pluralism. We as Hindus are the ones who celebrate diversity. And today in this country, when people cannot even talk with each other, families are split, friends are split on ideological issues. And so today, the need is there for Hinduism and Hindus to be understood much better. What are the problems today? And I can think of plenty of problems. Homelessness, poverty in this country. Then you look at weapons of mass destruction, war and peace issues. And on every one of them, Hindus have got from their own culture, from their own tradition, from their hundreds of years of history, and celebrated wonderful civilization. Civilization that at the present time, no one has reached that excellence. Talked about Bhagavad Gita and talk about other scriptures. And I can totally understand that in this country, obviously with the Judeo-Christian tradition, looking back to Greece and Rome, and there is absolutely no reason that they shouldn't do that. But I think the time has come that we also have to let them know that there is Sanskrit language, there is Kalidas, there is wonderful artistic tradition, and all of that can enrich this country. Similarly, today, opinion makers, decision makers in Washington, they need to understand what Hindus can bring it to this country, are doing it at the present time, and what Hinduism can do. So I think my own thought is that what needs to be done today is what Sattology wants to do, to tell the truth. But I need to say to you that today there is another part that needs to be done. There is a great deal of disinformation. There is misinformation. There is at the present time an effort on the part of many, and I would not say that all of them have got very not benevolent but malevolent kind of thinking. But I would certainly say that at this time, what has happened is that there is a, I think, countrywide effort at trying to give misinformation and disinformation about Hindus. And so the second part is that not simply we have to do that Sat ought to be brought to the attention, but we ought to counter that propaganda that is erroneous, propaganda that's totally in this country trying to have misinformation and disinformation spread. And so with that, I would stop. I was given 15 minutes. I hope that I haven't crossed the limits. So my namaskar, if there is one thing that I would do is we need to clone. We need to clone Satsangiji so that there are many like him who can do the work that he is doing. That is the need of the hour. That is how we can have Hindus and Hinduism be better understood in this country. So namaskar, everyone. Thank you.
Okay. You ready for me?
I think we are ready.
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Namaste. Good evening, everyone. Thank you to Aditya and Sattology for inviting me to be a part of this program. It's an honor. And, you know, the question Aditya put to me to speak on tonight was, what's the importance of yoga in American society? And you know, that's a pretty big question. So I will attempt to give an answer. And I think to do so, we need to sort of step back, to zoom out a little bit, if you will. We live in an era right now of unprecedented wealth and prosperity and power, like the way that we understand and use energy on the planet. As far as our understanding, we're at, you know, the highest point in human history, as far as we know. And we have billionaires that are literally shooting themselves into outer space now because, I don't know, maybe they don't have anything better to do with their time or their money, or maybe they think that that's the next place that they're going to make money. Whatever the reason they're doing it, they're doing it. At the same time, we have people on the planet that are going hungry, and we have a worldwide pandemic that we can't get under control, and we have climate change that threatens our very existence. So there are extreme highs and there are extreme lows, and that's sort of the material world. That's the nature of the world that we live in. There's both at the same time. So, you know, the question is, I suppose, how does yoga help with that? How could yoga possibly help with any of those issues? You know, I don't personally think that I'm a pessimist, but you look at some of the things that are going on in our society right now, and And the mayor was just speaking to some of these things. Our politics are crazy. People are all at their really opposite ends of the spectrum. Capitalism has sort of run amok. It's run its course, and people are starting to realize maybe this isn't really the way. There's a disintegration of moral standards and spiritual connection. Family units are broken. Everyone thinks that they're on their own. Everyone thinks, sort of, the story we've been told is that we are on our own, and it's all about us. It's all about me and my race to the top. We've got to work hard, play hard, I hear a lot. So we've got to push ourselves to our limit so that we can get to this imaginary goal that's been made up for us. And so our society has created a lack of care for the self, which leads to a lack of care for others and a lack of care for other beings, animals, or other creatures on the planet, a lack of care for the environment, a lack of care for the planet as a whole, because it's all about me. It's all about the individual. It's very ego-driven. And that's where yoga comes in. Yoga as a system is designed to check the ego. The Yoga Sutras from Patanjali say, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. One of my teachers says it another way. He says, yoga is a practice which empowers one to overcome the obstacle of the mind for the purpose of the self experiencing its own true nature. I like that. I connect with that. And that's sort of the human predicament, right? Our mind is always in the way. Our thoughts are always in the way. We're always thinking about what's next, always worried about the future or regretting what we did in the past. So we never have a moment to be present, to be aware of ourselves. And yoga is a practice of quieting all those fluctuations, all those ripples, so that we can actually be still and notice, start to understand ourselves. The ancient yogis teach that the true nature of the self is, they say, Sat Chit Ananda. Sat is eternal. And Chit means conscious or aware. Ananda means blissful. And they say our true self is all three of those things: conscious, aware, eternal, and full of bliss. So what does any of this have to do with stretching on a rubber yoga mat covered in latex? You know? Because really that's the understanding a lot of people have of yoga right now in America. Yoga is a fitness class. Yoga is fancy stretching. Or yoga is, making a perfect posture and taking a picture and posting it on Instagram. So what does that have to do with Sat Chit Ananda, or the mind? I think yoga, the swamis and the great teachers that brought yoga to the West didn't have that in mind, really. Yoga has been commercialized. These big businesses have realized that it's a multi-billion-dollar market, and they want a piece of it. And so the yoga clothes and the yoga mats, and yoga has become like the sexy thing to do. But yoga as fitness. Fortunately, I think the good news is that even if you whitewash it and take out all the deeper teachings and you take out all the connection to spirit that yoga really, at the end of the day, is, even if you're just doing yoga postures, still you're making a connection. And you start to become more self-aware. It's important to take care of your body. It's important to feel good in your body, because if you don't, then it's really hard to start to notice your mind and notice what's going on internally. So yoga postures, yoga asana is very important, because it's almost the first step in the practice of self-realization. In the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, they say it very simply. They say, practice and everything else is coming. You've got to do the practice, though. You've got to create a self-discipline and you've got to get on your mat. You've got to take care of yourself in order to start down that path. So to bring this all full circle, what is the importance of yoga in American society? I think we know that, if you have any sort of yoga practice, be it asana or japa meditation, chanting, anything like that, pranayama, we know that yoga calms the mind down and opens up the body. Harvard Medical Center and some other big institutions are doing research now on how yoga can help with depression, how yoga can help with PTSD and anxiety, eating disorders, and all sorts of other conditions. I think as we go deeper, as we start to build a practice, connect with ourselves, we start to we take care of ourselves, and we start to be able to take care of others. We start to create space. So instead of just reacting to things all the time, we can take a breath and make an informed action, not just a knee-jerk reaction. And as we start to do that, take care of ourselves, take care of others, we start to be able to understand a little bit our purpose on this planet, in this life. We start to be able to make more informed and better decisions if we're, a politician or a business leader or whatever it is. Instead of just thinking about me, making more money or whatever it is, that ego-driven response, we start to see the bigger picture and how we can help everyone around us. A moral decision, a dharmic decision. We go back to that idea of billionaires, trillionaires that are on the planet right now, and with just a little bit of their wealth, if they decided to, they could end world hunger or discover a new form of sustainable energy, whatever it is, if they wanted to. I use them as an example, but really, we all need to make that change. We all need to look inside and see what our true purpose is on the planet and how we can help, how we can be of service to our community and to the world. One of my favorite quotes is from Mahatma Gandhi, great soul. He says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." It's that simple. And I really feel like that is how yoga and why yoga is so important right here, right now, in our society and in the world in general. So, thank you again for listening to me, for taking the time to be a part of this event tonight. Namaste.
I think yoga is a very important contribution of Indian Americans to the American society. And this fact has been largely not because yoga is for the entire world. Every world has a right to be a yogi. And also meditation has become even more important in today's time, because meditation, we have already seen that how it has helped millions of Americans during COVID-19. Post there are approximately 450 new yoga and meditation centers opened in LA, and they've become a good successful business model just like yoga. Thank you, Zeb, for coming and sharing. I know it's very late for you in Atlanta, in Pittsburgh. Namaste. And now we have Nilesh Oak, my great friend, a researcher, Muni, and I also have many adjectives for him. He has done a fabulous work on ancient Indian history. He lives in Atlanta, and he has been a scholar par excellence. His 4 books have been so well received, and they have of the authenticity of Indian history. Nilesh, over to you. Please go ahead.
All right. Can you hear me well, Sharad ji or?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
all of us can hear you.
Okay, very good. So thank you, everyone. Thank you to Aditya ji, Sattology. Thank you to Sharad Mohan ji, Professor Ved Nanda ji, Padma Bhushan, Professor Ved Nanda ji, and Zeb Homison. Professor Nanda as well as Zeb Homison provided me the segue to what I would like to say, few words. Today, just after me, you are going to have a panel discussion on human rights versus human responsibilities. And so in this context, just to introduce, or let's say extend or further our understanding of Hinduism, I would like to share a few thoughts. Now, if you ask what is Hinduism, even to a average Hindu, and by average Hindu, I mean anyone, just like me or Aditya ji and many others, usually you will find that we would pause for a minute. And you would wonder, why is that? Now, sometimes that is because many times we don't know where to begin. We don't know where to start. Now, Ved Nanda ji mentioned, for example, likes of Emerson, they were fascinated by a very small text of Hinduism. Everyone seems to know the name, Bhagavad Gita, which is part of a bigger epic, the historical document called Mahabharata. And Henry David Thoreau talks about bathing every day in the intellect of Bhagavad Gita. So yes, we may start with a text like that, but it's very important to understand a big difference is that whereas now Hinduism is not a religion in the traditional sense, but for practical purposes, we will use as a religion. So do understand that whereas many religions are the religions of a book or a specific individual who initiated it, when it comes to Hinduism, you can simply think in terms of a religion of not a book, but a religion of a library. Still, people will talk Bhagavad Gita, but that just remains a very important, but one of the many books. Now, back to the panel discussion that you are going to have today, which is human rights versus human responsibilities, something that Hinduism can provide as a very good basic framework for any one of us to understand, to discuss, and actually to practice this balance between the rights and responsibilities. For example, if Zeb mentioned, he quoted Gandhiji in terms of be the change that you would like to have. Hinduism is very old. The names might have changed. It's a lot of synthesis that took place And if we have to talk of the foundation, I would say this, for example, I'll just utter some Sanskrit words, but I'll give a crude translation of it, which is very relevant to this whole discussion of how, especially in this wonderful multicultural part that is America, how do we understand each other? How do we remain sensitive to others? And so these three foundations of Hinduism, what I consider, what are understood by likes of Mahatma Gandhi, or one of his students who is a master in his own right called Vinoba. In fact, many people may not know this, but anytime Gandhi started a new creative initiative during the freedom struggle of India from colonialism, he used to always approach Vinoba and ask for his opinion. And so the three foundations of Hinduism, if we have to summarize those, they are, one is the endurance in conduct. That's where the karma comes into the picture, the karma bus, that it's a conviction that our acts, good or bad, are going to come back to either reward us or haunt us. So always trying to keep this principle in the mind is called achar sahishnata, or endurance in conduct. Always be in action. The second one is the freedom of thought, or in Sanskrit, vichar swatantra. And the third one is the basic framework of absolute moral standards. I did not use the word relative moral standards, but absolute moral standards. Now, the first one, the endurance in conduct, works on your body. Okay, so body is there for a service. So if we focus that, and then the freedom of thought is what? Freedom of intellect, the buddhi, that's the word. And then the last one, which is the conviction in the absolute moral standards, has to do with our mind, okay? Because mind is the most fickle, how to restrain it, how to focus it. Now, where does this come from? In fact, in these three cases, you don't see any regionalism. And what I mean by that is the karma, now this is becoming very well understood concept around the world. And then the freedom of thought is something great. I mean, you look at the American society, and in spite of the problems, if you objectively look at around the world, you will still find, if there is a way to quickly find a role model for rest of the world, it can be America in terms of freedom of thought or the openness. And then the absolute moral standards. How do we bring this together, or how did Hinduism realize this? It was a tapasya, it was basically a practicing, synthesizing, discussing, debating for thousands and thousands of years. Now, some of you may just be surprised what thousands of years I'm talking, because number of you might have heard the metaphor of Samudra Manthan. Okay, so the two groups of the same family got together, and then they essentially sloshed the ocean to get different things. Now remember, this is a metaphor. It is a metaphor for understanding our planet Earth, the ecosystem, and trying to find out useful things out of it for the benefit of humanity, but also the benefit of the entire ecosystem, excluding none. And some of the things that came out of it are agriculture, the science of navigation, the science of domestication, astronomy, medicine, and that's that metaphor. Now, if you want to understand how old is this, if you again ask the average Hindu or an Indian, I would say, you would hear, you say, how old is this civilization? Because we talk of Egyptian civilization, Greek civilization. And you would usually hear 5,000 years. Now, I'll tell you that that is a very lazy number. Okay, now I want to give you some guideline numbers, and I want you to hang on to your chairs so that in case you're surprised, you won't fall off. For example, this is essentially what Adityaji referred to is my work of last 30 plus years. And I started looking at the epic documents of Indian civilization, such as the Mahabharata, where the Bhagavad Gita appears, or Ramayana, okay, and the oldest text of humanity, which is Rigveda. Now, how big is Mahabharata? If you take Iliad and Odyssey, the two great epics of Greece, combine them together, and multiply it 8 times. That kind of gives you a rough idea how big is Mahabharata. So what I did, this is going back 20 plus, 30 plus years, in a very scientific fashion, I started extracting the astronomy observations from the Mahabharata text, from the Ramayana text, and then certain hydrology, geology evidence from Rigveda. And what that led me to, and now this is very interesting, is that the Mahabharata, the particular historical incident, the Krishna that if you're familiar with, as in Hare Krishna, for example, the individual, he existed more than 7,500 years ago, or Rama existed more than 14,000 years ago, or the oldest portion of Rigveda, the oldest text of humanity. Now remember, it was preserved not by writing, but it was preserved by one generation, one tradition, one generation of teachers teaching it verbally to the next generation of teachers. And the oldest portions, based on the geological evidence from this Rigveda, goes back to more than 24,000 years. In fact, the typical mnemonic formula I give everyone is a multiplication table of a 7. So if you want to understand when Mahabharata happened, go back more than 7,000 years ago. If you want to understand when Ramayana happened, go back more than 14,000 years ago. And if you want to understand the timing of Rigveda, I'm not saying it's 21,000 years ago. It's definitely more than 21,000 years ago. So 7,000, 14,000, 21,000 years ago. That's my research. But now the question is why? Why am I bringing this up? The point is the 3 principles that I told you, the conviction into the absolute moral standards, the conviction into the freedom of thought, and then the conviction into the endurance of conduct as the 3 pillars, 3 foundations of the tripod, if you want to call it, of this Indian civilization, the Hindu civilization, the Hinduism. If you pay attention, they are extremely broad in the sense of there is no sense of regionalism or there is no sense of religiosity into any of this. They are applicable beyond time, place, and circumstances. Now, what modifications we use, that depends on our specific situation. It can be specific to a certain country. It can be specific to a certain time. And it can be specific to certain circumstances, depending on the education of a specific society, depending on the climate. All kinds of factors will come into picture. So that is the 3 foundations are, you can consider as a gift of Hinduism, not just to America, but to the entire humanity. And you can see the inventions that India made or Hinduism made, they came from that background. There is no concept of patenting. To the extent, now I'm not saying whether we should patent things or not. Rightfully, if required, we should do it now. That's like change of circumstances. But my point is, many times these great inventions that were made, the inventor did not bother to write his or her name or did not bother to patent. Now, something similar that you could see in America that happened a long time ago. For example, Ben Franklin, if you have read his autobiography, he actually made many inventions, and every single time he was against patenting them. Now, this is not my lecture about patenting or not, but my point is there are these foundational principles. Yes, they can be modified if required, but they provide us a good basis for each one of us to understand the other in this wonderful multicultural society. And Hinduism, although in terms of number of individuals, it's a very small percentage of the population. It's a very influential in terms of what they bring to the table, whether it is in the society, whether it is in the civic society, whether it is at the workplace. So with that, I would like to give it back to Aditya ji here. So thank you again for inviting me. And all of you who are listening patiently, thank you again for listening. And I hope that you have a great time tonight. Thank you. Namaskar.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Nilesh, for sharing and letting us all know. And we have done many shows together. And Nilesh is one of the foremost research scholars in America on the ancient Indian history. And also, it is a good way for us to learn that when we just speak about Hindus, it's a very educated culture. It's a very elaborate history, and history is so deep that Western academics have not been able to even touch it. And most of the times, what they teach in the American universities is such a shame for us that we live in a free country and we do not allow freedom of thought. So with that, I'll move on to the next phase, which is thank you, Nilesh. I know it's very late for you and for Zeb also. And if you guys want to leave, it's perfectly fine. You are recorded in immortality.